Welcome back to Behavioral Science for Brands, a podcast where we connect academic insights and practical marketing to help you grow your brand and your business. Every other week, Richard and I sit down and we talk about some of the country's best brands and the behavioral science that's powering them. I'm Michael Aaron Flicker.
And I'm Richard Chotton.
And today, not a brand, Richard, but talking about the act of gift giving, the joy it gives to us and what it means to others. Let's get into it. So, Richard, as we start to think about the holiday season together, before we get into the business of the behavioral science that powers gift giving, are you more of a planner? Are you more of a last minute shopper? Where does Richard Chotton fall on the line of being ready for the holiday season?
I would try and do as much as possible online and avoid going anywhere near the town centre. Yeah.
And this is well in advance, or this is a little bit the night before Christmas?
No, somewhere in between, like maybe a week or two out. So trying to get users get as much as possible off Amazon. Keep it easy. That'd be my
Call
mantra.
it a day. Call it a day. We when I started when I was younger, we would travel to Florida to see my mother's family. So we created a tradition. We do all of our family holiday shopping on Christmas Eve at the mall all together. So we all go in, we break up into teams, we shop for a few hours, and then we are done. And you can get something that is in the mall, and that's the limit of the gift giving. Could not be different approaches. Yeah. Could not be more different. Most people think that sounds terrible.
That sounds terrible to me, yeah.
But there's lots of ways to plan your gift giving and to meet the holiday spirit. I thought let's go back a little, learn a little bit about the tradition of gift giving, because this is not something that's been around for thousands of years. And then let's get into some behavioral science that powers what we're talking about today. So gift giving, the way that we know it in America, began in the early 1800s. Particularly, the tradition was started in New York by a group of New Yorkers called the Knickerbockers. And it's interesting because between 1800 and 1850, the population in New York grew almost tenfold. And as there was this massive growth, there was a tradition where the city's poor could demand food and drink from the city's rich, and worrying that this would create like this social inversion, the Knickerbockers started to bring family celebrations of Christmas indoors, and they changed the dynamic to these public displays of celebration to more in the home. Retailers really glommed onto this, and this thus became the tradition of celebrating gift giving more privately and more in their own homes. And across the globe, there's different ways to celebrate the holidays, but generally in-home gift giving has become more of the norm in the last 150, 200 years. And gift giving is serious business. In America, $1 trillion worth of gifts were bought in the 2023 holiday season. The average American spends $925 per person, according to the Gallup poll. So, I mean, we're talking about a lot of disposable income being spent in a few short weeks between November and December. And interestingly, for our listeners at home, the amount of money being spent on gifts is roughly the same over the last 20 years. We'll put in the show notes a Gallup poll 20-year survey. Unadjusted for inflation, 20 years ago, it was just under 900. Now, 20 years later, it's just over 900. You see a fair dip in the 2008 financial crisis. But while the chart goes like this, generally, it's all surrounding about the same number. So it's interesting to see. And just because we're an international podcast here, friends, Americans not the most gifting of all the nations. Germany gifts over $1,000 a year in gifts, and your home country, United Kingdom, a little stingier.
Wow, I couldn't possibly agree with that. Surely we're just behind the Germans.
So at 729, you're about 3/4 of what the Germans gift in a normal year. But let's think about the behavioral science that will lead to gift giving. And you and I have sketched out two areas. One, we'll talk about how giving gifts makes people happier than spending money on themselves. And then after the break, we'll come back and we'll talk about the discrepancy between what people want to give versus what they want to receive and how this affects their gift choices. So, how about we jump in? And of course, we're going to look at how brands can apply these insights to what they do in the holiday season. So, let's start at the top. How giving gifts makes other people happier than spending money on themselves. Why don't you talk a little bit about this?
So one of the most interesting behavioural scientists working in the area of gift giving is Elizabeth Dunn at University of British Columbia. And she wrote a wonderful book called Happy Money. And in that, she looks at an awful lot of experiments into how what we think will make us happy and what actually makes happy tend to vary when it comes to spending money. And one of the interesting areas is her own, one of the most interesting studies is one of her own. Back in 2008, she recruits a group of people and she either gives them $5 or $20. And sometimes she says, go and spend this money on yourself, come back later and we're going to have a chat. And she asks people how happy they are before they spend the money and then how happy they are when they return later that day. Other people, they're given the same amount of the money, but they're told they must spend it on other people. And what she finds is a statistically significant difference. People who spend the money on others are more happy than people who've spent the money on themselves. Interestingly, doesn't really matter whether it's $5 or $20. The boost to happiness is pretty scale insensitive. But that result is different from what people expect. In a follow-up study, she tells another group of participants about what she's going to do and asks them to predict the impact on happiness. And what she finds is that most people assume spending on yourself is the best way to generate happiness.
Sure. You know what you want. I'm going to go and buy what I want.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we've spent, we spend as a nation, huge amounts of sums of money. But actually, Dunn's argument is that we're not spending that in the most efficient way to convert disposable income to happiness. We should be putting a far higher proportion into gift giving, both during the holiday season, December, but across the year. So it's yet another example from behavioural science of what people predict will be the most successful behavior and what's actually the most successful behavior. It varies.
Let me follow up on that last point. You said that she recommends that we should be giving more gifts. To what end? What is the reason it would increase the country's happiness?
Yeah, exactly. So what her study shows is if you have a fixed amount of cash that's left over after all your bills, you will generate more happiness for yourself if you spend that on others rather than on yourself.
I see.
Yet if you look at what most Americans, most Brits do, the vast majority of our disposable income is spent on ourselves. Dunn says this is a mistake. If you want to maximize happiness, you should be putting a greater proportion towards gifts for others.
And I think that's where we get the seed of the idea that can really add a lot of benefit for brands. So we have this example we'll put in the show notes from Pret a Manger. We did an episode earlier on Pret, but we did not talk about this feature that they have, which is for a period of time, they were allowing those who came into the store and bought to get a little tiny paper cup. And that paper cup was a free gift of coffee that they could gift to someone else. And maybe you can go through some of the details, but they could use it on themselves or they could gift it to others. But it was really underscoring the brand ethos that this is about doing good and helping others.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite a rare approach from a brand, but I think it's a really smart one. And what most brands do is occasionally give you a voucher for a freebie. And the assumption is you'll spend it on yourself.
Correct.
The difference Pret did was still hand out those vouchers, but it said, give this to someone else so they can enjoy a Pret. Now, if you think about Elizabeth Dunn's work, what Pret have done is essentially double or more than double the value of that promotion. The person who gives the voucher away to someone else feels really happy, and the person who spends the voucher, their friend, also feels really happy. So for exactly the same financial outlay, Pret have made two people very happy.
Yeah, interestingly, you and I have talked a lot in the past about applications of social proof. This feels like a really interesting lateral application of social proof, meaning I could tell you I really think Pret's coffee is delicious, but if I give you a voucher for you to try yourself, do you think that implies my endorsement as well? Why would I give you a voucher if I did not think it was a really great product to try?
Yeah, very good point. And I think there also might be an effect on, let's say you've given me the voucher for Pret and you're ambivalent about the quality of their coffee. There's some arguments from behavioural scientists, like people like Jack Brem, that our attitudes follow our behaviours. We normally think you change someone's
Right.
attitude towards a brand and
Then
then
they'll
they'll
go and
change their
do it.
behaviour.
Yeah.
But Brem says, well, of course that's true, but it also works the other way around. We look back at our past behaviour and then we use that behaviour to explain our attitudes. So if you've got a free voucher, of course you're going to give that away. What's the point of not doing so? Once you've given it, though, you'll remember that action and think to yourself, well, if I gave that voucher away, surely I must like Pret. Otherwise, it was a strange gesture. So something that
Interesting.
we could have had quite a neutral, ambivalent attitude towards the brand. I think by undertaking the behaviour, it will make us warmer towards that brand afterwards. So I think you're doubling the happiness you generate from the same investment because you've got the gift giver being happy and the gift receiver. You've got the implied endorsement. You've got this change of attitude in the giver. And I think the final thing, which is really good, is if you give freebie vouchers to your customers, well, you're giving freebies to people who are probably going to spend money with you anyway. There's a danger of cannibalization. But if you get those customers to give the voucher to someone else, well, there's a much greater probability that you're getting new customers to try the brand. So I think that the Pret example works on so many different levels. The only surprise is how rare it is. I don't think I've ever seen another brand adopt that approach. So I think this could be a really simple example that lots of retailers could essentially steal from Pret and apply to themselves.
I think that's the underscore of the business point. Almost all brands in this category have some type of free drink redemption program. So it costs you almost no more, if not no more, to change the way you operate the program to get all these incremental benefits. Whereas if it's just a card you punch, 9 drinks you buy, the 10th drink is free, it really changes the relationship with the brand and it changes the expectation of the consumer. So all these incremental benefits essentially for the same cost to the brand.
Yeah, that's the great thing about many behavioral science interventions. It's not necessarily more expensive. It's a small change to something you're already doing that just makes it more effective.
Yeah.
So it's a costless intervention, the behavioral science part.
And for those that are listening, if there's not this direct application where you can give away something for free, if your business or your brand doesn't have that type of transaction value, what is it that you could give to people as a gift that you could have your buyers gift away that would have value or that would have meaning? I think that's really the insight. Less the point is the free drink, more the point is the gifting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So, Richard, let's take a break. And when we come back from break, we'll talk about the psychology and behavioral science behind what we want to give as gift givers and what we want to receive.
Behavioral Science for Brands is brought to you by Method One. Method One is a team of modern marketers that practices the art and science of behavior change to fuel growth for indulgence brands. We do this by building interconnected marketing ecosystems that place the human experience at the center of brand building strategies across owned, earned, and paid media. To learn how to leverage behavioral science in your marketing or advertising, visit us at www.methodone.com.
Welcome back to Behavioral Science for Brands, a podcast where we take academic insights and practical marketing to help you grow your brand and your business. On today's episode, we're talking about the psychology of gift giving and how brands can use the moment of gift giving to help distinguish themselves and get more value out of every transaction. So, Richard, before we went to the break, we were talking about how gifts make other people happier than spending money on themselves. And we're going to take a different angle on this same type of insight. And we want to talk about the difference between people who want to give gifts and what they want to give, and people who want to receive gift and what they want to receive. And this creates a little bit of a dilemma for the retailer, for the person that wants to sell.
Yeah. So a theme in behavioral science is what gift givers want to give and what people want to receive are often very different things.
So let's make this practical. Like, what's an
Yes.
example?
So Thomas Gilovich at Cornell back in 2010 does a simple study, and he says to people, think back to the last time you received a gift. Some people he prompts by saying the last time you were given a material gift, other people you were given an experiential gift. And he says, how happy did that make you? And what he finds is the people who received an experiential gift, they say they were 13% happier than those who received the material gift. So we receive experiences, we tend to enjoy them more than a material item. However, if you ask people what they would like to give to others, you see the reverse. People like to hand over something concrete and tangible. They want to, see that moment of revelation when you realise you're given a Walkman, or well, that's probably not in the 1980s, are we?
A sweater.
A sweater. Thank you. What they don't want to do is give an experience when they don't see that moment of kind of usership. So I think there are firstly personal applications here. When you're thinking about what you're going to give to your friends and family this kind of holiday season, try and emphasize giving more experiences than material items. The people who receive it will enjoy the same spend more if you do that.
Dollar for dollar, people would prefer experiences over physical items.
Absolutely. So put aside what you'd like if you want to maximize their happiness. But then if you're a brand, you then have a bit of a dilemma, because you want the recipient to really enjoy your product because there'll be positive word of mouth, but you also need the buyer to be happy to purchase. So I wonder if you need to try and appeal to both these audiences. So if you create an experience, let's say you're selling, I don't know, a meal for two at a fancy restaurant,
Sure.
or a bungee jump, or a chocolate making lesson. Don't rely on making the actual experience amazing. What you've got to do for the giver to be happy is create a really nice moment of handover.
A physical item that manifests the experience so that they have something they can hold in their hand and give to the recipient.
Exactly. Not just some crappy piece of A4 that's been printed off and in black and
From
white.
my inkjet printer
Yeah.
that says your chocolate making class is next Tuesday.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if it's anything like my printer, it's been saying, low color for the last 6 months. It
Yeah.
comes out all faded.
Yeah.
Give people a chocolate bar that, they can open, and maybe it reveals you've got a chocolate making workshop gift.
Yes.
Accompany the experience with a physical item, and it will be appreciated more.
And we said the reverse would also be true. So you just talked about, if you sell experiences, make sure the gift giver has a physical item that will satisfy their desire to hand over something in the moment, and the recipient will be more excited about the experience they're going to get. But the reverse is true as well, meaning if you are a physical item, the more you can make an experience out of the act of receiving a physical item, the better it might be.
Absolutely. And there's a real financial benefit to brands, for brands to grapple with these questions, because people tend to be less price sensitive when they're buying gifts for others rather than purchasing for themselves. And again, this might come down to a discrepancy between what the giver thinks will make the recipient happy and what actually makes the recipient happy. Most givers labour under an assumption that the more they spend, the happier the recipient will be. But most studies suggest that's not really the case. Happiness from a gift is remarkably spend independent. But because givers think spend will increase happiness, they're looking for opportunities, especially for their really close loved ones, to spend a significant amount of money. So if you're a brand, having a more premium offering around holiday season is a great idea. And also thinking about investing in experiential accompaniments or these tangible items that can combine with the experience, it's worth doing because people will be prepared to pay for them.
So in this reverse scenario where you sell products, which is many of our listeners, let me try to draw this out for folks, and you tell me where I've got it right and where you would build on it. You could give someone a folded piece of paper with $25 in it and say, "Please enjoy this at your favorite coffee shop." Or you could go and buy a gift card and put the gift card in a card and say, "Please enjoy this." Or you could put the gift card in a box with tissue paper and wrapping, and you could wrap the box. And the experience of opening it and seeing a handwritten card that says, "I know you love your favorite coffee shop. Here's $25 to, Brooklyn's coffee shop," creates more of an experience when you're opening it that will enhance the enjoyment of the recipient.
Interestingly, it's almost the other way around.
Go for it.
It will enhance the enjoyment of the giver.
I see.
So I think as a brand, you want to make it really easy for people to have that gift wrapped option that looks beautiful. It's not actually going to benefit the recipient hugely. They're more focused on the experience that they get, but it will make it much more likely that that item is purchased because the giver will be happy to spend money on it.
Perfect. So a brand can take away, if we're going to sell gift cards or if we're going to do products in the holiday season, making sure the gift card feels premium and really like a finished gift is one idea. Offering gift wrapping or offering tissue paper and branded things as part of the holiday sales items would give the chance to make it a better experience when you give it
Yeah.
as a gift.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And again, I think this all draws down to understanding the state of mind of both the gift giver and the gift receiver helps brands better take advantage of the holiday season. It's one thing to say there's going to be $1 trillion of spend in the US. Let's make sure we get our piece of it. It's another thing to say, what's the state of mind of the buyer, both for themselves and for gifts they're going to give, and how can we take advantage of that to make the best experience for our brand and win the most amount of market share that we can.
Absolutely.
So, Richard, as we come to a close on today's episode, can you go back and remind us of the key learnings from today?
Yeah, I think we had three big things. We started with the Elizabeth Dunn experiment, where she shows that people who are forced to spend a set amount of cash on others tend to have a bigger boost to happiness than people who are forced to spend that same amount of money on themselves.
Yes.
The really interesting application, and it's quite a rare application that we discussed, was Pret. They had a lovely offer where rather than just handing out vouchers to customers for a free coffee, they handed out vouchers to customers for a free coffee that they suggested the customer gave to someone else. That is applying the Dunn principle, because what Pret benefit from is both the excitement and joy that the customer gets by handing over the voucher and also the joy that the end recipient gets. That, I think, is an idea that lots more brands could steal and apply. So that was the first thing we talked about. We then talked about the Gilovich study, which suggested that we tend as recipients to enjoy experiential gifts like a chocolate making workshop, rather than material gifts like the same value in actual physical chocolate. So if you want to maximize the happiness that you create this holiday season, give more experiences, fewer material items. And the third and final point, people are less price sensitive when it comes to gifting. We're happier spending excessively on others than on ourselves. We're less price sensitive. So a big opportunity here for brands is to position themselves as appropriate gifts rather than just being something we consume for ourselves.
So as we come to an end of today's episode, Richard, the best gift that you ever received?
I think certainly one of the best gifts was for my 40th birthday.
Yes.
And a very good friend called Fiona knows that I have a very deep love for crisps. And she bought me 40 bags of crisps, different brands, different flavors, and all individually wrapped. And I don't think I've ever been quite so happy.
Both a product and an experience. Right?
And completely unique. So that was and going back to our theme, that is, I don't know what she spent on it, but I would have thought about 20, 25 pounds.
Sure.
I've had far more expensive gifts in the past, but it's this point of givers think that it's the spend that makes people happy. Actually, the evidence when you talk to receivers is their happiness is quite independent of the amount spent. So it's another implication in the holiday season. You don't have to spend huge amounts to generate happiness. Maybe give more, but smaller, more thoughtful gifts.
And of course, the same remains true for brands as we think about what brands can do in the holiday season. You do not need to give necessarily a free gift with purchase. Something smaller that it better meets the need of the buyer can be just as good, if not better.
Yes. When we prioritize tailoring and thoughtfulness over cash spent.
Yeah.
What about yourself? Best giver?
It's funny that you raised your 40th birthday. For my 40th birthday, my wife got me a surprise dinner with my extended family. And it was not I thought we were going out just to a dinner alone. And instead, a lot of families showed up that I wasn't expecting. And what you realized was it was all about the experience. It was all about the experience.
I think that experience point is another interesting theme that we've been touching on. And there is an argument that experiences generate more happiness because of an idea called the hedonic treadmill, which is both a curse and a blessing for humanity. It's the idea that brilliant things and awful things affect us deeply to begin with, but we very quickly acclimatize. So if you spend money on a fancy car, hugely happy, but 2 months later, you've started to get used to the heated seats and the fancy sound system, and the joy that it brings evaporates. Experiences, we don't tend to suffer from that hedonic treadmill problem. We don't habituate to them as much. They create a very happy memory that lasts for much, much longer. So if people are listening, well, one thing they can do to get more bang for their buck is buy experiences rather than material presents.
Well, Richard, that wraps up today's episode. Thanks for the great conversation. If you found today's episode valuable, please give us a follow on YouTube or leave us a review. Those actions help us reach more listeners just like yourself. And for more in-depth content on the topics we covered today, visit theconsumerbehaviorlab.com. There we have a video of today's episode, a full transcript of Richard and my conversation, and show notes that give you all the source material that we referenced in today's talk. We also have regular updates on LinkedIn, so feel free to follow us there to keep up to date on everything the Consumer Behavior Lab is doing. Until next time, I'm Michael Aaron Flicker.
And I'm Richard Shotton.
Thanks for tuning in, and look forward to bringing you our next episode the week after next.